Well, 4 straight losses at home for the first time since 2015. Losses in 4 of 5 overall. Double-digit leads in all those games. Boston blew against Oklahoma City, Utah, Brooklyn, and Houston. And in many cases, leads of 17, 18, even 21 points. It's been frustrating. Another new edition of Celtics Beat. Adam Kaufman here with you, and thank you for tuning in. Thanks also for just joining us while things are getting a little hairy right now. I wish I had better news, but closing games has become a real problem for this Celtics team with 19 games left in the regular season and flailing hopes at landing the second seed in the Eastern Conference. Now a 3-game deficit behind those Raptors. Now, to be fair, Jaylen Brown, he's out with a hamstring injury. Gordon Hayward, Jason Tatum, they've missed some time. Kemba Walker as well. He's still clearly not right. So the C's far from being 100% overall, but these are still games that you need to win when you jump out to those huge leads like I talked about. Marcus Smart, his foul on Karis LeVert at the end of regulation, the Nets lost, just inexcusable. And then the Thunder game, most recently last night, and I was in the building for this, just given away when Kemba allowed Dennis Schroeder to take that ball, just strip it away, delivers the go-ahead layup, and Walker, all he had to do was hold the ball and wait to be fouled. That's it. So a pair of just really, really immensely frustrating losses. And, well, let's hear from Brad Stevens, Marcus Smart, Kemba Walker, and Gordon Hayward, all trying to cheer us up just a little bit.
You can feel like you're on top of the world one week, and you can feel like the sky is falling the next. And that's the hardest part about the NBA. That's just the way it goes. You know, we're in a way right now where we just don't sustain it the way that we know we can.
Well, it's on us. I don't know what's going on out there. It's like we let other teams pressure, take us out of the game. When that happens, this is the outcome. You know, we got to fix that. We got to be the aggressor. We got to punch first, and then if we get punched, we got to keep punching back.
We obviously have stuff to work on. I think that's how the NBA works. You know, you go through these runs and stretches where you're feeling really good about yourself, and then it's like the world's coming to an end too. So I think as individuals, as a team, we got to try to not get too high on the highs or too lows on the lows. And this is a low for us. We got to try to build ourselves, call ourselves back out of it. I think we'll find it again. We're still the same team. You know, we just got to lift each other up, find ways to win basketball games again.
You got to stay together. You know, it's definitely been some very tough losses, but we got to try our best to hold our heads high. Stuff like this happens, you know, losses come. You can learn from them. You can choose to, you know, get better or go the other way, or you know, everybody just go to the individual corners. But what we're going to do, we're going to get better.
This is the part about the NBA that is hard. It's also fun to look back on when you kind of overcome it.
Here's a crazy thing. That smart cut that you heard amidst all the others, all of those, with the exception of Marcus, were after the Thunder game. Marcus, that was a few days ago. It speaks to what an annoying trend this has been for this team. So as I welcome in Keith Smith from Yahoo Sports, NBC Sports, Celtics blog, he's all over the place, pretty much wherever you like to read about the NBA. Keith, what the heck, man? I mean, why has closing become such a problem these last couple weeks when it otherwise really hadn't been much of the year?
Yeah, it's one of those things that's mystifying, and I want to kind of tend to say I lean more towards the Brad Stevens thoughts that he led your audio clips with of that's what happens in the NBA. Sometimes you look great, sometimes you don't, and you know, but closing games, this shouldn't be a thing. Jason Tatum, he isn't ready for that yet. You know, he's been really great, you know, fantastic season, became an all-star, player of the month in February, all those things. But maybe he's not quite ready. Kemba Walker, he didn't look so good last night. He's obviously still dealing with getting back. But you would think between those two, Gordon Hayward, Jaylen Brown when he's healthy, you ought to be able to find at least one of those guys to throw the ball to each night and say, take us home. And it really just hasn't happened in really, we're talking about a week or so now. It just hasn't come down to it. And that Cavs game, that was just more of almost kind of in some ways felt like time just sort of ran out on Cleveland, or maybe they might have been putting the Celtics on a 5-game losing streak here.
Do you put the problems more on the offense or the defense? Because, I mean, you could very easily point to either side during this little rut.
Yeah, I think it's the defense starting, then leading to the offense. I think they key so much of their offensive production off of getting good defensive plays. Mm-hmm. And what we've seen in these handful of games is you have now multiple players from these teams that have just kind of beat the Celtics almost single-handedly, I guess is the easiest way I can put it. Karis LeVert went crazy and went off. Russell Westbrook, Colin Sexton, the game Boston won, but he went nuts. Mike Conley, and then Chris Paul last night. Chris Paul in yesterday's game, Sunday, got to wherever he wanted on the floor. Now he's Chris Paul, but you would think the Celtics should be able to control that a little bit. That was, that's what was disappointing. And then when they can't get those stops, I think they put more pressure on themselves to have to get a score every time down. I think that's when you start to see guys come maybe a little bit out of the good ball movement, player movement offense. They see guys are trying to do it a little bit too much themselves, and that's where it all breaks down for them. So I think it's problems defensively then lead to problems offensively.
Maybe the answer is what we just discussed, but because, of course, you do the popular takeaway columns for Celtics blog after each and every game, and, it's always more fun when they're positive takeaways than negative, although we were talking a little bit off air about the fan base, and I think it's sort of the nature of fans. It's in any market, by the way, not just Celtics fans or anything, but it's more typical. It's part of the human essence as a sports fan to complain when things are bad than to celebrate when things are good. So you tend to get more reaction out of the negatives. So in the spirit of a negative, what is the C's biggest flaw right now as a team? And you can't say lack of health, obviously.
Oh, man, you took the easy one right off the table there. No, I think it's I'm going to cheat a little bit here because I think it's somewhat created from the lack of health, but it's not the lack of health. I don't think they really know who they are late in games. I think because you haven't had enough time with those five kind of key guys, Tatum, Hayward, Smart, Walker, and Brown, on the court together late in those games, I think that there's still that little bit of uncertainty to, all right, should we defer to Kemba because he's the vet who has done this a million times, or do we let the kids who are obviously the future of this thing lead us? Well, Hayward's actually in there tonight, and he's got it going. Maybe he should be the guy. And then we all know Marcus Smart's never going to shy away from taking a big shot late in the game himself or trying to make something happen. And I think that's, to me, the biggest problem that has emerged really since that pretty good West Coast trip has been these guys are late in the games. There's just too much trying to do it by themselves and not enough sticking together as a team.
Tatum really has been terrific this year. We know that. We celebrate him almost week to week on this show, reigning East Player of the Month, all of that. But I can't help but wonder, do you see the offense becoming a bit too Tatum-centric, too ISO, too predictable, too kind of Paul Pierce-like? And that can sound like a dig, certainly in the way that I'm presenting it. But, I think the flow, the fact that any guy can step up, any guy can take the last shot, that element of the offense throughout so much of this year was a lot more of a positive to me than the end of games now where you just sort of feel like fourth quarter, you need some buckets, Tatum's going to get the ball.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that. And it goes back to what I said before. I don't know that he's ready to be that guy who, get it to me, we're going to play through me, 15, 20 straight possessions in a row in the fourth quarter, and we'll make things happen, because he's still, while he is a much, much improved passer and playmaker for others, he's still a scorer. That's what his mindset is. That's, where he's at in this stage of his career. So if he's getting the ball, more likely than not, the shot's going to go up. Now, positive development, we've seen him start to read those doubles and traps, and he's making the right reads and in the passes. As that's all new for him. That's not something he's faced. But I think what almost happened is, I think some of the injuries have caused, there's a lot of times when I notice this, it's kind of Tatum and 4 reserves, or Tatum, Smart, and 3 reserves out there together at a time. And I think that has led to, all right, I'm taking over. I'm going to be the one who has to score the points here. And that's fine in those situations. But then when Hayward, Walker, Brown are back out there with them, it's tough to shut that off, because now it's going to be, all right, now I got it going, I'm going to go. And 22 shots last night, that's not the end of the world. We want to see him get shots up against a team like OKC. 22 shots is fine. But there was a couple points in the game where it was, this is a little bit of a force. And the last thing I want to add with that is, I think he needs to go get to the same place. And I think we'll see this next season, where Jaylen Brown has made huge leaps. Part of why he's become such a good, consistent scorer is he's really tightened up his handle. So now you have trouble with Brown of kind of he's not loose with the ball. He's getting to where he wants to be. When Tatum is able to tighten up his handle, that's going to make everything easier, whether that's to get himself where he wants to be for shots or get himself into positions to find his teammates a little easier. Right now, it's not that he's an easy cover, but when you put a guy like Chris Paul on him, he can't just take him off the dribble because Paul's going to strip it away from him, knock it away, make it tough on him. And I think that's probably the single biggest thing he needs to clean up in his offensive game.
A guy that quite frankly, I really wasn't thinking about talking to you about this show as I was starting to kind of put together my notes and thoughts and talking with my producer, Evan Valenti, and all that. And then some people started tweeting me about this individual, and it was, okay, all right, let's examine this a little bit, because we usually don't when this team is doing well versus when it's doing poorly. It's not an X-factor type of guy, at least initially in your mind, and I'm talking about Enes Kanter, because he has served a role off the bench this year. I think more often than not, he's filled it pretty well. And he's certainly a fan favorite just because he's such a likable guy and he's got his podcast out there and all that. But the last month, his last 11 games, he's been terrible. 13 minutes per, 3.7 points, 5.5 rebounds. He's only shooting 39%. Prior to the last 11 games, all the way through the first, 39 games, I think it is, he's averaged 10 points, 8.5 boards. He's shot 60%. And clearly, we're talking about offense, never mind the deficiencies in his defensive game. But are we talking enough about Kanter and the lack of efficiency over the last month?
Yeah, probably not. I think there is definitely some connection there to these recent struggles. Now, a couple of those games, for example, the Houston Rockets, I know he played big in the one game against Houston and really did some good stuff. But then that second game, by that point, Houston was, we're not playing anybody big. We're playing 5 out. That's just not the game for Kanter. It's going to go poorly if you try to play him more than a couple of minutes. There's just no one for him to guard. But then in these other games, Brooklyn, Utah, Oklahoma City, he's had a guy to guard. And what I'll say is we criticize Brad Stevens a lot for not pulling the trigger fast enough. He tends to like to let his guys play through it. He tends to stick with his guys. And he has pulled the trigger very quickly on getting Kanter out of those games. Utah killed them off the pick and roll. And Kanter played, I want to say it was only about maybe 8 or 9 minutes in that game. And then maybe it wasn't even that. It might have only been 5. And then last night he only played 6 minutes because OKC went right back to it, whether he was guarding Steven Adams or Nerlens Noel. They went right to it, and he only played just under 6 minutes in yesterday's game on Sunday. So that is the challenge, I think, for Kanter is you're going to have to either commit to building your defense around him. And I think that's where missing a couple guys has hurt, because you don't have that defensive connectivity around him to kind of mask what he can and can't do. When you're mixing and matching in all these other guys, he becomes exposed just that much more. But this is a worry now, because you're counting on him to give you minutes in the playoffs, give you 10 to 15 minutes, good, solid basketball where he rebounds and scores inside behind Daniel Tice, because otherwise Tice he's either going to foul out or he's going to wear down. I mean, that's just the reality of him as a player. We know this. And that's the worry, because now you're leaning on Robert Williams. We all love his potential and what he can do, but second-year guy who's had kind of 2 lost-ish seasons a little bit, and due to injuries, you're going to comfortable playing him 20 minutes a night in a playoff game. I don't know. We'll see. So I think that's the worry. So it's really hard, because I want to give Stevens credit for pulling the trigger quickly on saying get Kanter out of there, when it's not working. But on the flip side, you got to figure this out. Otherwise, that's it really becomes a wasted roster spot.
Let's go back to Kemba Walker. We've mentioned him a few times already, and clearly at the end of that Thunder game yesterday, the GOAT, and not in the Tom Brady sort of way. And everyone is fixated on that turnover, the giveaway, and much of the reason it's not his fault they wound up in that position. You don't blow an 18-point lead, especially against a team at home that's missing its best star, biggest leading scorer on the other side in SGA, but still. Didn't come up big, wasn't an all-star caliber play. We're not even talking about the big turnover in the final seconds of that Nets game in regulation, because we're so, preoccupied by the Marcus Smart foul that never should have happened. So he has had trouble now in 2 out of the last 3 games late when you're looking for him to just basically dribble out the clock. And it's, these last few games, you really can go back a month, but in particular these last few games, he's only averaging 16 points, 32% shooting, 25% from 3, 9.3 attempts, by the way, from beyond the arc, and he's shooting that poorly. Few turnovers per. And again, it is just a few games, but he's not right health-wise.
This is not the first time that I've had a stretch like this in my career where I haven't been playing so well, but I'll be better.
I'm not worried about the minutes restriction thing. It's starting to get lifted. He played 30 today. That was about what we had set out for him today. So Kemba's one of our best players. We need him to have a chance to do anything significant, and we all know it. And so whatever it takes for us all to be at our best when our best is needed, we need to be at our best when our best is needed. He's a critical piece, obviously.
So as we hear from Kemba and, of course, Brad Stevens, any cause for concern, Keith, or is this just a rut?
I think it's a little bit of both. He's absolutely right. Kemba's always been this guy. Now, he was kind of out of sight, out of mind for so long in Charlotte where, by the time we hit this point in the season, no one really cared what he was doing because past the All-Star break and they just weren't relevant. But this has always been the case with him. He goes through these cold stretches. He's a little bit of a streaky guy. But what worries me is, I want to say since he's gotten back, he's been blocked 4 or 5 times on layups. He is not shooting well in and around the rim. He's a small guy who really relies on his quickness and explosiveness to get up and finish inside the paint. And that was probably the thing I think that more fans said to me was, I didn't realize how good he was getting to the basket earlier in the season. So I'm worried that that's where the knee is impacting him. And as you said, he's getting up a lot more three-pointers, which tells me, one, fine, he's a good shooter. We want him taking those jump shots if you're the Celtics fans. But your challenge becomes is it too many? And that's what's going up because that's all he can get because he doesn't have the quickness and explosiveness to get past guys. And even if he can get past them, he can't get up to finish in and around the basket area. And that's a problem. That's going to be something to really watch because if Kemba turns into a spot-up shooter or a pull-up jump shooter and those kind of things, you're going to have to make an awful lot of those, and then he becomes just a much, much easier guy to guard. And that's not the way the Celtics offense was built to function. They were built with him, kind of getting downhill and being on the attack.
There are a lot of different times this season that I've really marveled, quite frankly, at how well the Celtics play down a man, frankly, more often than not. And I say this while acknowledging the health issues that we've, already spent a little bit of time on, but can this team win a playoff series without one of its top 5 players? And I guess I'm not as focused on the first round so much as the second round. Can it do any damage in the playoffs if, say, a Kemba Walker's out for a series, or Jalen's out for a series, or Tatum is out for a series, or Hayward's out for a series? You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I think it depends on who they're playing. If they're playing Indiana, or if they can somehow get up into that 2 seed, still they're now 3 games behind Toronto, so that's starting to look a little like bleak. That's probably not going to be how it goes. Yeah, bleak is a good way to put it. But if they could get up there and it's Brooklyn or Orlando, sure, they can get by one of those teams. But if you're in the 3 seed and you're playing Philadelphia, and I'm assuming Philadelphia is back to full health, that's a huge challenge. If you're in the 4 seed and you're having to play Philly or Miami or whoever in that mix, that's going to get tough. But you're hopeful you can still get through a first round series just by where they should be seeded. It's going to be in that second round, Milwaukee, Toronto. You're not going to beat either one of those guys unless you have everybody healthy, and all 4 of those main kind of offensive guys are all healthy and playing well. Because you can't really you're not going to get through those if one of those guys kind of pulls a no-show and goes missing either.
Well, because you brought it up, if the Sixers are the 6th seed and the Celtics finish as the 3rd seed, do you see that as a problem for Boston?
I don't. Again, if let's say both sides come in healthy, I don't. I think the Celtics can beat them. I think I go back to before the season, I asked an opposing coach, I said, hey, how's Boston going to defend Philly? They're going to have to play them 4 times in the regular season. At some point, you assume they're going to have to go through each other in the playoffs. And he walked through a few things that they could do. But what he left me with, which has stuck with me, and it's proven to be true when they have played each other, is he said, Philadelphia has to guard them too. And how are they going to guard the Celtics? Now, that was when Al Horford was definitely going to be in the starting 5. And who knows what that'll look like by the time we get to a potential playoff series. But Horford, that means he's going to defend one of Tatum, Hayward, or Brown. That's tough. I mean, nothing has shown me this year that Al Horford's going to be up to that task. And that's why I think Boston, what they do better in playoff series, which is why they have advanced outside of last season's debacle, why they have advanced further than I think most people have expected, is Brad Stevens is able to game plan, and he finds an attack point for an opponent where it's, we're going to go at this guy over and over and over and over again. And if you take him out, then what we're going to do is we're going to find the next guy. And they will bleed those mismatches for everything they can get out of them. And we know that they're going to be, if everybody's there, they're going to be solid defensively, because nothing tells us that they have always been. So I'm not overly worried about that matchup. I think Embiid, he averages 30, 35 points a game for the series, but I don't think they're overly concerned about that. It's how it's really going to get to the other 60 to 70 points that they're going to need to win. That's what Boston's going to be focused on taking away on that end.
Does the fact that Boston has spent so much of this year banged up serve as another example of why the team really can't afford to rest guys down the stretch? I mean, from the standpoint of chasing the 2 seed, obviously forget it, but also there's chemistry, and you brought this up earlier. The key guys have barely been on the floor together this year.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. They've got to play it out. You know, seeding reasons, not that just yet, to get those minutes together. It's also a reason why when anybody, jumps on, you get them in your mentions, because I see him just like I see him in mine. Why did Danny Ainge not do anything?
Yeah.
Why did he not go get somebody? There's a part of me that says, I understand. Who did you want him to get? And people got to stop with the Jamal Crawford stuff. There's a reason Jamal Crawford's out of the league and was barely in the league last year.
Yep.
Like, he was, relegated to the end of the Phoenix Suns bench. Like, I love Jamal Crawford, but he's done. You could make a case for Isaiah Thomas, and I can believe in that case, because I think he could be a little bit of a scoring punch off the bench. And I think the challenge there is there's just a lot of optics, because if he comes in, he's not playing well, and now he's banished to the 11th, 12th, 13th man role, well, that could potentially be issues. And then the rest of it's cost-controlled players, it's guys with guaranteed money next year, all those things. But I look at it and say, a guy like Alec Burks or Glenn Robinson III, if you could have just thrown a pick at that, the Golden State Warriors, and, maybe a Carson Edwards or something, as the Warriors are just doing what they can to find any, diamond mining process out there throughout the rest of the season, maybe that works. And that might have been enough of an upgrade where on these nights when one of these main guys is nicked up, you're not going to some unproven rookie or a guy who's a career backup in the game and hoping for the best. Now, yeah, every once in a while you get the Semi Ojeleye performance in Cleveland where it was fantastic. But more often than not, you're getting a whole bunch of zeros and negative games and those kind of things, and that's just a huge problem. So, yeah, injury, seeding, chemistry-wise, they can't afford to be without anybody. I think, your hope now is get Jaylen Brown back. You're really playing it out, for the next month until you get to that last week of the season, and then maybe at that point that's where you start to say, all right, let's, we can sit a couple guys here. We're going to take it off because maybe there isn't much to play for.
Well, the NBA calendar as well as key family birthdays, I'd have to imagine. So at this point, how much time do teams have to get somebody on the buyout market to be able to then use in the playoffs?
Yeah, buyout market can now. So this is where the confusion comes in. The March 1st deadline was the deadline a player who is currently on a roster had to be waived by. So that's past us. Anybody who was already waived. So let's use Isaiah Thomas as the example. He's a free agent. Boston can add that player all the way up to the last day of the regular season. So that's the middle Wednesday the 15th of April. That is the last day of the regular season. You can sign a guy there and have him be playoff eligible for you. There's only a couple guys who were waived after the waiver deadline that wouldn't be playoff eligible, and anybody waived now going forward would not be eligible for the playoffs. But you can add somebody, who's already cut loose in advance of that March 1st deadline anytime for now, 5 weeks.
So are we safe to say, and I believe we are, but I'll get your opinion, are we safe to say that Boston's not going to do anything and the roster is what it is, or should Boston be willing to pursue someone who can provide a little offense off the bench, like an Isaiah Thomas, and, then cut Javonte Green or Vincent Poirier, even though obviously the latter would mean dead cap money next year?
Yeah, barring a major injury, I think the Celtics are what they are. And I think I think what you would be more likely to see than a player brought in from from free agency is a conversion for a guy like Tremont Waters. Maybe they look at it and say, all right, Javonte Green, we like what he's done, but he's not a part of this roster next year. Because that's the other thing that's factoring in here, too. They're going to have 3 or 4 first-round draft picks.
I hope not, but yeah.
but yeah, I'm with you, but I think they're going to at this point. It looks like Memphis is either going to need to really fall off and then have a bunch of lottery luck.
No, I just meant hopefully there'll be a trade before then. But I know where you're coming from.
But yeah, so right now, it's funny. There was a time when I would have said, yeah, I'm with you. There's no way they're going to do that. Now I'm kind of like, I don't know. We haven't seen one in a while. Maybe they will bring all those guys in. But if they do that, you're running out of roster spots really quick because you've got a whole bunch of guys under contract and all these other things. So it's a very long answer to your question of, maybe you look at it and say, all right, Javonte Green's not going to make this team next year. He's not going to be there. We can convert Tremont Waters. We can lock him up for the next couple of seasons or whatever and bring him in. And that's, I think, the more likely move. Maybe they look at it and say, but if you start looking at who's out there in free agency, it's pretty bare. There's not guys you, I think, could look at it and say, all right, that guy would really help. I think Isaiah Thomas could help, but there's also a big story component coming in there. That's that's a fun story. I think we could all get behind rooting for him again. But the challenge comes in is, this is the hard part with that is Isaiah Thomas going to come into Boston? I know everybody wants to tweet me. He says he wants to play. He says he'd come back. Yeah, that's easy to say today from the couch. But is he going to come back and have it? It's not going to be what it was before. He is a 15-minute-a-night player now for the Celtics as they're currently constructed. Or maybe he plays 25, 30 minutes on a night when Kemba Walker is out or something like that. But he's not going to come in here and play, 35 to 40 minutes a night, be the guy who has the ball in his hands all the time and king of the fourth and all that other stuff. That's not where the Celtics are at. That's not where he's at. So I think that becomes a challenge. If anybody's looking to recapture that past glory, you're a little misguided because it's probably not going to go that way. But that's the only type of move I think you see them do unless it's a conversion for somebody else. And that could happen too because of just the whole roster spot issue as well of, well, let's get Tremont Waters locked up now because otherwise we run the risk of losing him in free agency and all these other things.
Celtics president of basketball operations Danny Ainge has been asked about this topic, bench scoring, a lot lately. Last week said once again, second straight week during this interview on 98.5 The Sports Hub, that he does not believe that's an issue that is facing this team. And let's hear some of Ainge here, and fair warning, it's a lengthy answer.
Some teams are designed differently. Some teams bring their top scorers off the bench. Lou Williams, as an example, and like Manu Ginobili, we talked about the Kevin McHale, John Havlicek. There's a bunch of them, and there's guys around the league. But we scored 120 points against Brooklyn. We had plenty of people. We scored 110 points, I think, against Houston. It doesn't matter who scores the points, if it's your top 5 players, your top 6 players, or, whether you get points from your 8 or 9 guy. I've never been a real big believer that it's offense or it's defense or it's rebounding or it's shot blocking. I really believe that it's more of a mindset and a mentality. Obviously, you need talent. Obviously, you need enough shooting, enough size, and so forth. But I think as much as anything, it's a mindset. I think the last 3 games our team has been out-physicaled in the game. I think that we haven't played with the desperation that we needed. We're trying to bring some guys back and things like that. And, our team is worn down after an LA road or after a, West Coast road trip, or maybe it's just the dog days of the season right now. But, we just haven't played like we're capable of playing. I don't think it has anything to do with bench scoring or rim protection. I think it has a lot more to do with our intensity and our determination. And I would just add that I'm not worried about that with this team. I'm just saying, that's been the case.
So if we're operating, Keith, under the basis that nothing is going to change roster-wise, personnel-wise, and, we both feel that way, and I got into this a little bit with Bob Ryan, along with the Boston Globe, on last week's show, and, asked him, all right, so let's, in going with what Ainge was saying with, the Lou Williams of the world and some of the impactful players coming off the bench providing offense, especially in light of what's going on with this team on the floor right now. Is a shakeup needed? Does it make sense for Gordon Hayward to come off the bench? We've certainly seen that in the past. Should Marcus Smart be starting because he's not an offensive juggernaut, and you try and come up with a little more balance to your lineup in terms of the way those minutes are distributed?
Yeah, there's something to be said for that. I've even seen some people say it should be Kemba Walker comes off the bench, and people go right to make him our Lou Williams. And I'm like, good Lord, you paid this guy, $130 million. You want a $130 million six man? Like, that's, not how you build a roster.
Well, same story with Hayward.
So, yeah, no, absolutely same story with Hayward. Now, I think I would not do anything. What I would do is, when Brown is back here, hopefully later this week, go back to your Tatum, Brown, Hayward, Walker, Tice group. See what you got there. Let Smart be kind of that guy who comes in, because I love Smart's energy off the bench. I think he changes games with that. He comes in with just this, fire, and everybody gets going, and he's going to, within the first couple minutes that he's out there, he's going to dive on the floor, or, go up and rip a rebound away from a 7-footer or something like that, and that gets everybody going. Then I think what I would like to see, and we're starting to see it little bits here, more and more and more, is Stevens is relying on guys like Romeo Langford. We saw him make some defensive plays yesterday against the Thunder. We saw him go up and for that big putback dunk that he had in that game. And I'd like to see him, maybe get some of those snippets, work Kanter and then where it goes, and see if you can start to really flesh out your 8-9-man playoff rotation. I think that's what it's about more than doing the changes. Now, I think going into the offseason, you might need to relook at some things and say, all right, what is the right balance for this team? Because what can be hard is to play four guys together who need the ball a lot. We saw that last year. Where I think it works a little bit better for Boston is Walker and Hayward and Tatum as well are pretty good when they're playing off the ball as shooters or cutters and those kind of things. So I think that does make a difference as opposed to guys who really need it to create offense on their own. So, but I think that's probably at this point, you got to stick with what you got and ride it out, because you envision the roster being built a certain way, and you still, even though we're here now in the middle of March, we haven't seen it, but you still got to try to get to that point.
We've still got, like I said earlier, 19 games left. It's March 9th as we chat right now, so there's a ways to go, and things can certainly change when it comes to injuries and that sort of thing. But just playing it out, everybody's healthy. Playoffs begin tomorrow. What is that playoff rotation? In no particular order, but your 8-9 guys.
I think it's the five starters I mentioned. Smart, Grant Williams. We know that those are your two bench guys for sure. Those are going to be 6 and 7. I think then your Kanter and Williams, let's call them almost a hybrid, because I think they're both going to play. I think Stevens is going to use that three-headed monster that they used very well, briefly, although earlier this year. And then it becomes kind of matchup based. If you're going against the Giannis's, the Ben Simmons, it's probably Semi Ojeleye who gets in there and see some of those minutes. And then maybe if not, and you're looking to play Smart a little bit more off the ball, that's probably where Brad Wanamaker factors back in there, which I know anybody who's listening to this probably just turned it off and said, I'm done. I hate that guy. Wanamaker's taken a lot of grief here
really
recently.
Has.
But I think that's probably where you're at. Yeah, and it's tough because it's short memory, right? We're only thinking about what we just saw versus this guy has been actually pretty solid in his role. And when you really look at it, he's a third point guard who's been asked to play backup point guard all year long.
Yeah.
Because either Smart's been needed as the backup wing or, Smart's starting because Walker is out. And that's he's been having to do a lot more than he probably should, and that's tough and all those things. And just to throw it out there, Shane Larkin's not coming back. Shane Larkin makes millions of dollars over in Turkey and is playing an absolute starring role. If you haven't checked it out, check it out because he has been dominant for their. Plus, he now plays for the Turkish national team. It's not happening. But I think that's it. I think you can reliably count on Grant Williams and Marcus Smart off the bench behind the five starters, and then some combo of Kanter and Robert Williams, and then we'll see who else it is. Maybe it's Langford some nights, maybe it's Ojeleye, maybe it's Wanamaker, and that's where you're going to go. I don't think we're going to see much of Vincent Poirier or I think he's at this point now. You're looking at that as that $2.6 million next year. That's all about being valuable and trade matching, and that's about it.
I was at the MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference on Friday, took in a panel with C's assistant GM Mike Zarin, who, of course, is year annually. And one of the interesting questions that was posed during this particular seminar, and Zach Lowe was part of it, and a whole bunch of other people, was really interesting. But one of the interesting questions revolved around how much teams should play guys the last month or so of the season. You know, should you play them more to prepare for a heavier workload in the playoffs, or do you play them less because you want your stars to be as fresh as possible in the spring? Zarin more or less said it just depends, and it's way more complicated than asking it in such a basic way. And I also think, just personal opinion, he didn't really want to give anything away either, so he just didn't want to dive into it at all. But what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to give probably a kind of similar non-answer. I do think it depends. I think it depends on where you're at. I think for the Celtics this year, you need to play because not only for seeding reasons, but you need to really find out, who are my 8? Who are guys 7, 8, and 9 that I can trust in a playoff series? I got to figure that out. Hopefully the top 6 are all healthy. I got to find out who 7, 8, and 9 are. If you're the Milwaukee Bucks and you're cruising and there's nothing to be gained for you, yeah, you should be, which is weird to say because nobody's playing very many minutes for that team. Anyway, I think Giannis is still the only guy averaging more than 30 minutes a night. He's just above that. I think you say, forget it. Let's just, we're out there you're treating it almost like glorified preseason games. Get out there so it's enough to keep the rust off, but we're not pushing for anything, and we know who we are. We know who our team is. So I think it is very situationally based. For this year's Celtics, 100%, I think you got to play, and you got to play it out almost all the way to the end. See where you're at that last week of the season. If there's nothing left there, then that's where you can spot some guys, some rest days, and go from there.
A couple other things that are not nearly as relevant as all the other things that we have been discussing. And the first here that I want to get to is the coronavirus situation. If you've fans out there, if you've tried to get Marcus Smart's autograph lately, here's why you have not been able to.
I actually kind of stopped it before they even suggested it. I don't sign as many autographs either because of it. It's tough. Obviously, you want to interact with your fans, but unfortunately, the safe risk that's involved for not just us, but for the fans as well. You want to try to limit it. So, the fans, hopefully they'll understand. It's not malicious. It's nothing towards them. It's just to keep everybody safe.
Smart talking about not taking pens or jerseys or balls or, anything to autograph just so as to not spread germs. Doesn't want to touch you, basically. Now the NBA has told teams to prepare for the possibility of playing in empty arenas. No fans, no media, just essential personnel. It's already happened in Europe and on the college level just a little bit. It's going to start to happen a little bit more. Kemba Walker and LeBron James weighed in.
That'd be terrible. I'd be born. I might as well cancel the whole game for that. That would suck. But at the end of the day, it is getting serious. I don't know. It'd be very weird, though.
I ain't playing. I ain't got the fans in the crowd. That's what I play for. Play for my teammates, I play for the fans. That's what it's all about. So if I show up to an arena and ain't no fans in there, I ain't playing. They can do what they want to do. I ain't never played the game without no fans. Ever since I started playing ball.
You're starting to see, obviously, more and more guys being asked about this. There's the reaction in arenas. I mentioned I was at that game just last night, Celtics Thunder. One of the more amazing things that I saw in the crowd, Keith, was I was in the balcony section, and there was seemingly a family, 3 people, a dad and 2 kids, that were all wearing face masks. They had masks on over their mouths. They also had goggles on covering their eyes, which to me was not even the craziest thing about this. The craziest thing was that they weren't wearing any gloves or anything like that. And as they left, because they left early, maybe to duck out and avoid the crowds or just beat traffic or who knows what, but dragging their hands along the railings the whole way down. I would like to think that you're more likely to, catch germs from touching things versus just breathing it in. But what the hell do I know? I'm no medical expert. So that to me was a little bit nutty. But the whole thing here is a little bit nutty. That, the hysteria surrounding this outbreak, and maybe that's me taking it lightly compared to how I should be viewing it. But do you think this is a reality that we're going to see, that, when push comes to shove, we're going to see some of these games, televised with nobody in the crowd?
I think there is a pretty good chance that that's where we go. Now, I don't want to put a percentage on it, but I think that it's definitely far more than non-zero. I think we have now seen that all across Europe. A lot of those sporting events have been either postponed, canceled, or are being played in closed venues if they're the bigger sports, so soccer and basketball of the world. We've seen they just canceled the big tennis tournament out in California. A massive fitness competition was canceled. South by Southwest completely canceled their event there. So, yeah, I think it is interesting. As you know, I live in Orlando, so theme park capital of the world. And, we're seeing different things here in the tourist destinations where a lot of people are doing that. And then it's funny, as you said, they're the masks and goggles and everything else, and then they're touching everything under the sun. Well, we saw a family who was all, taking every precaution, but the daughter's got the mask up on her forehead and she's licking on one of the handrails. So, hey, I think you're probably in trouble.
Yeah.
Rex Chapman retweeted a girl kind of licking up and down a handrail. Not only yourself, but you're making that kind of gross for everybody else. But I think just putting it back to the NBA, I think there is a strong likelihood where I am guessing, this is just a guess, but with all the stuff that's been coming out, my guess is some point this week, locker rooms become closed environments. The NHL has already gone to that. I think the NBA will be next, which if you've been in any NBA locker room, especially the visiting locker room, it's extremely tight quarters in there, and everybody's, just on top of each other. So I think you're going to see that. I think you're going to see interviews done, in the interview rooms, at the podium, those kind of things where you can keep your distance. And I would not be surprised at all we get to a point where games are closed events and there are no fans in attendance, and you've got maybe even a remote broadcast crew, which is more common than I think people realize.
You see that in the Olympics a lot, yeah.
In the Olympics, you see it in a lot of the European sports as well, where the guys are calling the game. Maybe they're giving you an English language call of the game, but they're nowhere near the country. They're just picking up the broadcast there. NBA TV has even done it on occasion, where they picked it up and then have their own guys call it from their broadcast center. So we'll see what it looks like. I think there's a chance, and I think I get where the players are coming from, saying I'm not gonna play. I translate that into I wouldn't want to play because they're gonna play. I mean, I know what LeBron James just said, but LeBron James is not going to walk out and say, all right, Lakers, see you later. I know we had a chance of winning the title, but I'm going to sit out for the next 20 games while we play in closed arenas. That's not going to happen.
Boy, can you imagine playoff games in that environment? My God.
I know. Yeah, and it's funny because I even had, somebody asked me, like, do you think teams are going to start thinking about, maybe home court advantage doesn't matter if we're not playing? And I was like, I don't think anybody's thinking that far ahead. You're lucky if you can get players and coaches to tell you what day of the week it is and who they're playing tomorrow.
Yeah.
Never mind.
It'd be true, though. Home court advantage would mean absolutely nothing if you have nobody in the stands.
Yeah. The only advantage would be the players are in their own
where you get to sleep at night.
But that's it. And for some of those guys, they'll tell you that if you're Gordon Hayward with a whole bunch of little kids at home, he might get better rest when he's on the road.
Yeah, and another one coming. Daddy's always happy.
Yeah, that's it. A boy, finally.
Had to keep trying.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, somebody had tweeted me saying, that guy really needs a hobby. I said, I think he's got one.
I think he's got. I think he's taking the Phillip Rivers approach there.
Yeah.
But it's they're only one away from a basketball team.
Yeah, right.
Maybe that's the goal. But yeah, I do. I think as sad as it might be, I think that's where we're headed. I think there's a big conference call. We're recording this on Monday. There's a big conference call today. It's a very light NBA schedule, and the NBA is doing a conference call with all the team trainers and medical staff to really talk about, all right, here's what we need to do going forward. And I think people underestimate, right? I know I can go on a flight from Orlando to Boston or Orlando to Las Vegas or anywhere I go, and I always feel a little bit like crap after I get off the plane. Mm-hmm. These guys live on planes, and I know they're private planes for the most part, and they're so a lot of teams now own their own planes and these things. But it's still it's a tough environment, and then fan interaction and those kind of things, and then then we see other guys who they're just blatantly disregarding what they've been told, and they're up in the crowd taking pictures and high-fiving everybody under the sun, and so it's just it's one of those things where I think I always go back to the vast majority of these guys are in their early to mid-20s, And when you're in your early to mid-20s, you're invincible, right? I never get sick. I can run all day, and I'm fine. And that's maybe the mindset. But I do think we're in to see the league change a little bit with the way it looks here, the product, as far as the presentation part of it going forward, at least probably for the remainder of maybe this regular season.
All right, last thing we're going to talk about here, and it doesn't really go in a natural order. I would have done it earlier, except I deliberately, thinking of you, the listener, and all the Celtics fans that are tired of even hearing the name Kyrie Irving and the bashing that goes along with that, and oftentimes out of my mouth or on Twitter or wherever else, that's fine. I saved this for the end. We're not doing any more Celtics stuff. This will now be Kyrie for the next couple of minutes, so if you want to turn the show off, turn the show off. That is totally up to you. But the Nets have fired head coach Kenny Atkinson. Royally screwed, as far as I'm concerned, because he was one of the better coaches in the NBA last year. Total chemistry shift with the turnover over the course of the offseason and the moves they had to make in order to bring in that three-headed monster of Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, DeAndre Jordan. Irving, of course, as we know, only played 20 games this year and then shut down, surgery. Durant has not played all year, but he has kind of lurked in the background. And then DeAndre Jordan has played but not well. And here is what Jordan said in strongly disputing the notion that Irving and Durant influenced the decision for Atkinson to go.
Yeah, I'm close to Kyrie, but, Wilson's a new player. Garrett Temple's a new player. We're all new players. So if you go say new players, put it on all 8 of the new players. I think whatever you're saying and whatever the reports are, so.
Okay, I think all of that is BS. I know there's some reporting that has started to come out of this, and we don't know the exact story just yet. And maybe Kenny Atkinson is breathing a giant sigh of relief that, that he is no longer there having to deal with this future headache, a team that I have said since this roster was constructed that I don't believe it's going to work out to the degree that other people want it to or would like to say it will next year when fully healthy, if even fully healthy. Let's say Irving and Durant make it through the year next year. I still don't think that's a championship team. I don't think it's a team that's even going to the finals, and I'm skeptical they're going to go to the conference finals. I think it will be a massive underachievement there in Brooklyn for years to come. I think that I understand why they made the move they did. You bring in stars. It's a star-driven league. I think they're going to look back on this little era and say, hey, we had to go for it, but it screwed up. Kind of in the same way that Danny Ainge probably looks at bringing Kyrie into Boston. We had to go for it, but it didn't go well. I think that's how it's going to be viewed there in Brooklyn. But this decision to move on from Atkinson, how did you view this thing?
Yeah, I'm with you. Absolutely ridiculous. I think it doesn't make any sense at all. I think as you looked at this, Kenny Atkinson and Sean Marks, and I witnessed it firsthand, seeing them together multiple different times, whether that be down here in Orlando or out in Las Vegas, as they were coming together. Those two were in as lockstep as any coach and GM were in the league. And they rebuilt that team literally from nothing. They didn't have draft picks. They didn't have good, talented players. They plucked guys off the scrap heap like Spencer Dinwiddie, Joe Harris. Atkinson and staff coached those guys up, got the best basketball out of those guys. Just all around, the Nets built into a point where they became, for me, as someone who covers the Celtics, the Nets were the team I think I watched next most because of the fact that Boston had all their draft picks. They were so linked for so many years that it became – I really found myself becoming a fan of what that Nets team was building. Because you could see it. You could see that, incremental improvement night to night. And, wow, this team's getting better. And, boy, this guy's really, stepping up. And I think this team might, have a chance to become something and all those things. And for them to just throw that away. Now, Steve Jones was the first guy I saw who said this. He's worked for a handful of NBA teams as a coach and in the video team as well for a handful of different teams. He said, in the NBA, you build up your culture to the point where you can finally sell it off to go get stars. And that's just how it works. You said it. We saw the Celtics do it. They built up their culture of we're scrappy, we're hardworking and all this stuff, and now we're bringing in Kyrie and Gordon Hayward, and we're going and getting stars, and we're going to chase after a championship. Because culture is great, but stars win titles. That said, I'm with you. I don't think this Nets team ever is a meaningful contender there. You made such a banking with this group on Kyrie is going to get and stay healthy. Hasn't happened. Hasn't really happened throughout the duration of his career, other than a couple of years in Cleveland. And that Kevin Durant, at on the wrong side of 30 is going to come back from an injury that it's either wrecked or drastically changed careers for everybody who's torn an Achilles in the NBA. The only guy who is just as good before and after was Elton Brand, and Elton Brand couldn't jump over a phone book. So that was, a case of his game didn't really change, and he was, pretty early on he tore it and then was good. Everybody else drastically impacted and has really struggled. So for me, that was already a gamble. Now you're going to do it with a brand new coach who's got to come in and basically start all over again, because that team, it was never about this year for Brooklyn. I've been saying that for months and months and months. It was about this year is just a transition year. Hopefully we're good enough to still make the playoffs. They're going to be. A lot of that's more the rest of the East isn't very good, but they're still going to get in the playoffs. They're going to be, in there. Maybe, we can be competitive and make some noise, and then we figure out everything in next year is the big year. But now you have to start over again with a new coach. You're going to have to reintegrate Irving and Durant. They obviously have some feelings on who should and shouldn't be on the roster and pieces like that. And I think that's where, as you look at this, if you're the Nets, I think you're looking at next year, and everyone will write it off as, well, it's not, it's 2020, 21 is not really about, we're just getting those guys healthy and back. It's really about 21, 22, and now those guys are in the last guaranteed year of their contracts, and by that point, this isn't really working. Do I want to be here? I want to be somewhere else. And this could all fall apart and go south very, very quickly on them.
Well, and here's the bottom line, Keith. The whole two sides to every coin. Like, let's say DeAndre Jordan is truthful in saying that Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant did not influence the decision to get rid of Kenny Atkinson. Fine. But with that truth is another truth automatically. Because, again, star-driven league. If Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant did want Kenny Atkinson to be that head coach, he'd still be there. Yeah,
that's absolutely spot on. And I think DeAndre Jordan, what he's doing there, that's actually one of the few signs this year that he is, not him, but someone on that team is stepping up and being a really great teammate. Because what he's doing is Kyrie and KD aren't there to talk. They're now off rehabbing. We're not going to see them probably give any kind of meaningful interviews until maybe next fall, right at the start of training camp. Well, maybe over the summer. If
maybe Durant will say something over the summer.
Yeah, or Durant will go at some 15-year-old on Twitter, and that'll become a story. Yeah. But it is, that's DeAndre Jordan basically saying, all right, these guys aren't here to talk for themselves, so I got their back. I'll be the one who steps up and says, hey, they're not doing anything different. So I think it is going to be, I think it's going to be really, it's just going to be now. The questions are going to be the rest of this year are, you're basically the rest of this year going into whatever their playoff length is. It's probably going to be a short duration. It's going to be more about what about next year? Who's going to be the coach? And you've got a handful of guys on that team that are like, hey, we're still trying to win games and be a playoff team here, and no one really cares because fair or unfair, no one believes in this roster going very far. So it's just it's now you've turned the remainder of this season. It's a throwaway. It's a mess. I think if you saw this Nets team, if they were only a game or two up in the playoffs, you could almost see them turn it the other way and just say, forget it. Let's go, let's go the other way, and we'll let somebody pass us. We'll get a better draft pick and all these things. And it's just it's tough to watch, built there. And what's funny is what I came to realize yesterday, yet again, 100th millionth time we've been taught this lesson. Fans root for laundry because the amount of fans who at the beginning of the season would have yelled at you if you said, Kenny Atkinson's probably going to get fired at some point this year. You would have been called every, nasty name in the book. Yeah. Now, it was time to go. He's it wasn't working. He's got to go, and do. And it's like, what are we doing here? Like this guy was, you're kind of, 1-1A of fixing your franchise, and now it's, send him home. but Kenny Atkinson, the good news is he's going to be fine. And good for him because now he's got a head start on any opening in the league. He's going to be probably candidate, 1-1A for just about every team out there.
Keith Smith, always appreciate the insights, pal.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
As always, great stuff from Keith. A lot of stuff to think about, certainly well beyond the Kyrie junk. I mean, this coronavirus it's remarkable, the impact this could have on the league going forward. And just, I'm talking about this in purely sports and business, not all of the obvious health concerns that revolve around with it. And you know, to tune into your local news stations or national news stations for commentary on that. We're fixated on sports, and the idea of playoff basketball in empty arenas and watching those on television with remote broadcasters and satellite locations, it's fascinating. Not something I'm rooting for, but the possible inevitability of it, as Keith talked about, really interesting. Would not be the same experience there, absolutely, in the postseason for Celtics fans who are so used to flooding the Garden and putting a real impact in these games, and how well Boston fans travel, too. But that'll about do it for time. We've gone for about an hour. So leave your thoughts. You can get me on Twitter, at Adam M. Kaufman. As always, appreciate you following along here with this show. It's going to be a tricky stretch here. A few games this week, beginning tomorrow night in Indiana. You know, heading home, Brad Stevens and Gordon Hayward. And then, of course, on Thursday in Milwaukee, but maybe, just maybe, the Seas catch a break if Giannis Antetokounmpo does not play in that one. He's dealing with a left knee sprain. Thanks to Keith, to Evan Valenti, my producer, Nick, Larry, John, everybody at CLNS Media. Of course, thanks to you. Find us on iTunes. Just search Celtics or Celtics Beat. We'll pop right up. Always appreciate it when you leave us a review or a rating, or both if you're feeling generous. And as I said, on Twitter, at Adam M. Kaufman. We got a whole lot to talk about here in the fourth quarter of the NBA's regular season. Gino, get us out of here.